you probably haven't seen, and you may not have heard of one of the most important movies of the last 25 years. Important is kind of a loaded word when it comes to art. What makes something important? Oftentimes, when it's something that was just released, it just means that the critics agree with its politics. I do not hold to this definition. What I consider important is usually something that changes things. Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs was important. The Matrix was important. Lenny Bruce was important. Important doesn't necessarily mean good. The Sex Pistols were important. Sometimes you know in the moment that something is important. I left the theater after 300 and I thought, I think I just saw something that's going to be a big deal. My sister's career ambition from a young age was to be a Disney animator. We saw Toy Story when she was 5, and she left thinking, my job is dead. Very astute little girl, but that's rare. Usually, you don't know something is important for a few years. Something like the signing of the Declaration of Independence was something that everyone knew had the potential to be important, but only if Americans won. If they lost, it's just a footnote attached to a really dumb decision. So sometimes for something to be important, you have to see how it plays out. But sometimes something mundane can turn into something important because of the unexpected effect it had. You decide to go to a bar you don't normally go to, and next thing you know, you're 30 years married to the woman you met there, and you have twin grandchildren on your knees. 2,000 years ago, the Roman Senate was making decisions and negotiating deals. The emperor was making plans that affected everyone in the empire, and a Jewish carpenter none of them knew existed was crucified in Judea. And that was the thing that changed the world. To quote C.S. Lewis's Out of the Silent Planet, when you and I met, the meeting was over very shortly. It was nothing. Now it is growing something as we remember it. What will it be when I remember it as I lie down to die? What it makes in me all my days till then? That is the real meeting. The other is only the beginning of it. This is all way too philosophical and profound for what I'm about to talk about, but sometimes you have to get deep when you define your terms. In 2005, a movie starring an actress no one knew the name of, a TV actor, a well past his prime 80s heartthrob, another actor so washed up that he was considered a liability for any movie, and directed by a first-time director who was a screenwriter before he left Hollywood for 9 years, was released. And even though it only cost $15 million to make, it still bombed. That movie was Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, and we are still feeling the effects of this movie 20 years later, for good or ill. Kiss Kiss Bang Bang's director was a man named Shane Black, and he is someone whose name you should know. For a long time, he was a working screenwriter, meaning he was brought in to doctor scripts, tweak them, get them where they needed to be, etc. But in 1985 or 86, I'm not sure how long the production was, he sold a script called Lethal Weapon. It would be difficult to overstate how big a deal Lethal Weapon was. It brought noir into the modern world and gave a new language for action movies. It was realistic while also bombastic and still serious, which was the formula that action movies took basically until The Matrix came out. It made Mel Gibson a superstar, it perfected a serious version of the buddy film, and made just under 9 times its budget. Weirdly, this is one of the rare times where the plotting, characters, and dialogue were handled so expertly that Black was given almost as much credit for its success as Donner, Gibson, and Glover. Black's star exploded, and he couldn't write scripts fast enough for the line of producers standing outside his door. Just 7 years later, he was paid a record-setting $4 million for The Long Kiss Goodnight. And then he vanished. Long Kiss Goodnight bombed, and frankly, rightfully so. It's not very good. But Black's career didn't end because of that. He quit. Within 6 months of the movie's release, he announced he was leaving Hollywood forever. Why? In an interview, he said what happened is because he was paid so much for the script, when it bombed, he was surrounded by people he thought were his friends, and they all seemed happy that his movie flopped, and he was just sick of LA. This is where I'm going to get a little conspiratorial. In, I believe, the same interview, he said that a through line in his movies is that girls should be protected, and I agree. In most of his movies, women are often abused. They're killed in terrible ways, they're taken advantage of, they're treated as objects, but, and this is important, it's always shown to be reprehensible. There's something gross about the way women appear in the background of scenes in his movies. And that's not just my taste. They are shot to be that way. Now, with that seeming to be a strong enough part of Black's moral compass for it to be a part of most of his scripts, he lived and worked in Hollywood, a place renowned for its abuse of women. I think Black was a Me Too person decades before it was a thing, and he got sick of it and left. To add to my evidence, he returned to Hollywood with Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, a movie that, while incredibly entertaining, is practically a screed against women's abuse in Hollywood. I could be wrong, but it's a theory. But Shane Black came back to Hollywood with a fantastically plotted movie and great characters. But the dialogue, oh my gosh, the dialogue. There's Joss Whedon quippy, and there's Gilmore Girls rapid fire, and then there's Kiss Kiss Bang Bang's combination of both. I said in a past video that we should stop blaming Whedon for our current spate of characters who can't take anything seriously because, unlike James Gunn, he knows how to not just make jokes, but make them character and situationally appropriate. Kiss Kiss Bang Bang has jokes at a pace that would make Arthur Christmas blink, but never once does it take away from the tension or the characters. The humor and dialogue in this was unlike anything else being made at the time, but we're seeing it now. This is a movie that, while it bombed, writers love it, and it influenced a lot of them. It influenced me in my writing. A friend of mine and I were trying to make a movie together, and at one point, he read my script and told me it was too long. I insisted it wasn't. On set, I kept telling the actors to speed up, and we got pretty far past the usual 1 page is 1 minute problem because I heard dialogue quick in my head, and that is mainly this movie's influence. And Pushing Daisies. Man, that show was good. But the biggest thing this movie did, accidentally if I'm being honest, is that thoroughly washed up actor was Robert Downey Jr. 2 years prior, he made his first movie since sobering up, The Singing Detective. Until writing this, I had never heard of that movie. Apparently, for good reason, Kiss Kiss Bang Bang bombed. It cost $15 million to make, and the general rule is you add that number again for marketing, and that brings you to the real cost, so $30 million. It made less than 16. That's a pretty bad bomb. The Singing Detective cost $8 million and made less than $600,000. I've never seen a number that low. Apparently, it was only released in 46 theaters across the world. Why was it made? Anyway, for that movie, Mel Gibson was a producer, and he had been friends with RDJ for a while. And when he hit rock bottom, he let RDJ live in his house and helped him get sober. Then, Mel Gibson produced The Singing Detective and wanted to cast Robert Downey Jr., and because of his past, the studio said they needed an upfront payment from him as insurance in case he ruined the production. Robert Downey Jr. couldn't afford that, so Mel Gibson took the risk and paid for his friend to be in the movie. While the movie bombed, production went through without a hitch. This signaled to Hollywood that maybe they could trust Robert Downey Jr. again. The first movie made with that trust was Kiss Kiss Bang Bang. While it didn't do well, people did see it, and it developed a small cult following, of which I am a member. And like I said earlier, screenwriters love that movie. So if you can think of a Hollywood screenwriter, they have probably seen it. And that included Jon Favreau. Favreau has said in several interviews that he saw Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, and Robert Downey Jr.'s performance convinced him that he was perfect for Tony Stark. He was so convinced that he never even considered anyone else. Marvel suggested other actors, and his response was usually, yeah, he's pretty good, but did you see Downey Jr.'s screen test? Marvel finally caved, and Jon got his way. I don't need to tell you that the plans for the MCU hinged on Iron Man being a success. If it could be construed as a failure in any way, the whole thing would have been abandoned, and there would be no MCU, and we wouldn't be living in its shadow today. Whether or not you think that is good is irrelevant. It simply is. And it's a thing that doesn't happen if Robert Downey Jr. was not cast as Tony Stark, which would not have happened without Kiss Kiss Bang Bang. This little flop of a movie led to the creation of and the dialogue style of the MCU, which makes it one of the most important movies of the 21st century so far. Also, it's a really good movie, and you should definitely see it if you haven't. Language warning, but dang, it's good. You'll see me next time if you subscribe. Bye.